Welcome to the Integral Stage Sexuality Series. I'm Layman Pascal, and before I host my high-priced week-long workshop on integrative sexuality at a seaside Caribbean resort, I need to make sure I've been fully exposed to the multidimensional richness and profundity of this topic. A topic that most people find deeply physically compelling, emotionally significant, and for some people intellectually fascinating and brimming with spiritual and developmental potential. Here to share the ins and outs of their understanding is... Introduce yourself.
Oh my gosh. My name's Susan. I'm an alcoholic. Wait. Oh, wrong meeting. Wrong. My name's Jason, and most people call me the McClain. I've been studying, advanced models for personal development and how they apply in real world situations, which I think is the sort of my pet peeve. People get into theory, but they don't. For 25 years now, and been, an evolutionary guide professionally for 16 full time. So, yeah.
Okay, we're going to take that experience and mindset of yours and aim it at relationships and sexuality, which is something you're already working on. When we talked before, one of the things that really stood out to me was this distinction between like the sacred masculine and the superior man versus this idea of the evolutionary gentleman that you've been working on.
Yeah.
What do you mean by the evolutionary gentleman, and why is that an important distinction to make in your mind from those other?
Thank you. That's a great question. So one of the problems I had was, I was seeing a lot of people talk about divine masculine and, like blah, blah, blah. There's all this shit going on, right? I also saw there's a lot of, well, I'm not going to pull any punches in this. I'm just going to say what comes up. So I saw a lot of feminized men talking about divine masculine. But I also see a lot of shit around guys teaching men how to polarize with women. And so, it got down to like, well, if you're not wearing the right shoes, you're not really masculine. I'm like, you're really sort of missing the point. And so I started looking at what was actually missing. And I've been getting feedback from mostly women, but also men, like, you need to start teaching the stuff that, like, what is it that you do? I'm like, I'm just being me. And because I had been, studying all sorts of stuff, and, my background in integral theory and stage work really brings that to light. But also I've been an NLP master practitioner for 25 years. So I started to put that lens on it, like modeling out what structures were in place and what was going on there. But I think it's really important to lay out what an evolutionary gentleman is. So actually, somebody I was doing a workshop with, she's like, well, what are the qualities? And so I have a bullet pointed list that I just pulled. Can I read it? So first of all, he's got like the baseline gentleman stuff there. Like it's like a return to being a gentleman. You open doors. You also close them. You don't open the door to the car and then walk around and let her close. Like you make sure her straps, her belts are in, her hems are inside the car. Like so she feels taken care of in that way. Like you're a gentleman. You open doors. If she's got a request, you make a request for that. And not that she's not capable of doing that. In fact, I won't deal with women who aren't fully autonomous. Like I'm not looking for a woman that wants to be taken care of. I want a woman who knows she can take care of herself, but wants to surrender into the feminine. So, we're talking about, for those who know about Data's work or about Ken Wilber's integral theory, like we're talking about stage 3. We're talking about a stage 3 relationship. He's emotionally developed. He's perceptive. He's aware. He's capable of play, spontaneity, and fun because he's emotionally free. He's done a lot of his own personal work. He's unattached to outcomes sexually. Like, there's no like, oh, we have to do this thing or we have to, So that means like, of course, you want to focus on her pleasure, but you like you don't want to put pressure on her to climax or pressure on you having sex. It's like, hey, we don't like whatever. However it goes is the way I like to say it, to give. It's like, however this, it goes however it goes. It's not a big deal. Like there's no, so that sort of lack of fixation on outcome. He does have so he can have the important grounding conversations when necessary. But, it's not like you got to do a lot of processing, because I think that's just a bunch of fucking navel gazing. It's like you should be free enough to be able to have rapid conversations.
How do you tell the difference between an important grounding conversation and useless indulgence?
So if there's a thing you feel like you can't say, or if there's a thing that's like happened so whenever I start a relationship, whether it's a business partner or whether it's a lover or a woman I want to date, like I set up these 4 basic agreements, not those 4 agreements. I set up 4 basic agreements at the beginning. It's like, first, truth over comfort. We tell the truth, we hear the truth, and hearing the truth can sometimes be a lot more. A lot of people just tell the truth as a self-indulgence. Like, well, that's just my truth. It's like, no, you're just being a cunt, dude. You know what I mean? Can I swear on this program?
Yeah, go ahead.
I should have got it first.
It's a safe space, Jason. Go ahead.
Oh, that's another one. An evolutionary gentleman creates his own safety. Because he has high self-esteem. He doesn't require other people to create safety for him. How do you know the difference? I think these agreements will inform that question, and then we can talk about that question. Hear the truth, tell the truth, truth over comfort. And so we value truth over our own comfort or the comfort of, others. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the whole, like, well, I can't say that, it'll hurt their feelings. I'm like, no, you better say that, because like it's going to be more hurtful later on. Like if a woman doesn't communicate to me her preferences, and then she just waits and waits and waits because she doesn't want to hurt my feelings, and then she ends up just disappearing, that's even more hurtful, right? So I have it that, you need to be able to hear the truth, but also tell the truth over your own comfort or over those. And then we don't hold each other accountable to any agreements we have not made. That's the second agreement. The third agreement is, if I'm upset, I make a request for a new agreement, usually. And then the fourth agreement is that we are responsible for our own experience, especially our own emotional experience. But, like, we don't wait for someone to do the thing that we want, or we have agency for our own experience. Where it gets into like self-indulgent processing or just, postmodern navel gazing is when, people spend 2 hours processing shit. I remember, this is a great metaphor. My wife, 20 years ago when I was married, my wife and I were in the fetish community. And at one point it took, because, we're going to talk about sex. It took, she was like setting a thing up, and it took 2 hours and we were probably going to have sex for about an hour. And I was like, hey, I'm going to say that we have a new rule. If it takes longer to set up the room than it is for us to actually do the scene, I'm not doing it. like, I don't know what other thing you need to hang or put glitter on, but for fuck's sake, And I think it's very similar with, in my experience, most processing could actually be done much more rapidly. If people just heard it, asked if they had a request, or if there's anything else they want to do differently, just thank them for telling the truth. And the whole weird meshy processing thing, which I just feel is like a slog, or it indicates that somebody's not free for themselves. If I feel like somebody's just indulging it for the purpose of feeling connected, and I sniff that shit out like a truffle pig, and I'm just a no.
Do you think there's something developmentally useful about the fetish community, or is it just something that some people like for a while?
Well, I think there's something developmentally useful in all contexts of all life. So I have it, if there's a thing you're like, oh, I couldn't do that, that's something to look at. In my experience in the fetish community, there's a lot of unclean dynamics being played out on people. And that when I say on people, I mean that not with, but like on them. And so I think, it's great to explore kink and fetishes. And I think a lot of people are like, well, I didn't know that was my thing. Or I never thought I could share that thing. And so I certainly think there's things to be played out developmentally. And I think people's, as long as it's clean, man, I saw a lot of stuff. I'm like, that should be worked out in a therapist's office. Like,
So what do you
there's
need?
just obvious. Yeah.
What does it look like when a sexual community is clean versus unclean?
Well, one of the reasons I really haven't stayed around those communities is because I don't have a whole lot of examples of the latter. I give you plenty of examples of reasons that my wife and I like would not be involved in the fetish community.
Yeah,
after
sure.
a while in San Francisco. And we were the ones that they used to ask to be DMs, which is dungeon master and dungeon mistress. So we'd make sure everybody's playing by the rules, nobody's safety's at risk, like that. I think partly because of our perception, our awareness, and it doesn't hurt to have a couple of hot people walking around the thing. But I didn't see a lot of orgasms, and I'll give you two really extreme examples, like somebody just getting whipped and not having it, like they're just, or being spit on. Like I can certainly, I thought about bringing this up when I was in the shower a couple hours ago. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to bring that up. Like I've had, one of the things I've had a lot of, and I'm going to circle back. I've had a lot of women, say, God, I've never felt like surrendering to a man, but when I'm around you, like they just naturally surrender, partly because I have everything handled. I know how to, like, they know I'm competent to navigate what's happening. But there are a lot of things I won't do. I will help her find that experience because I have no insecurities around that. So sure, like if you want to experience a thing that I don't want to participate in, like if she wants me to aggressively kiss her and drool in her mouth, sure. Spit on her, probably not. Actually not. So, but I saw a lot of stuff. Like, let me give you one really vivid example. There was this is one of the last parties we went to. And it was a play party. There's probably 100 people there, lots of equipment. And one of those pieces of equipment was a scaffolding. It was like 30-foot ceilings. And there were 4 transgender women who were, obese, unattractive. And they had one really pretty feminine woman tied to the scaffolding. And they were just doing blood and flame play with her. And I was like, maybe I'm wrong, but watching, it just looked like let's abuse the pretty girl, because there were 5 really unattractive girls with, I'm not sure which direction they were going in, male to female or female to male, but it just looked like a very odd psychological dynamic to be played out. Now, the pretty girl looked like she was enjoying it. So who knows, maybe it was her fantasy. But I just thought whatever's going on there, maybe not do it in a sexual context.
Right. You find a lot of these communities are sliding into psychodrama and away from anything that's actually sexual.
Yeah. And that was, the complaint that my wife and I consistently had was it just didn't look like there was enough pleasure. It didn't, like, why aren't people having more orgasms? Why aren't people feeling better? Why is just like, and I wanted to create, a dungeon that was like all white, like white leather, white walls, like maybe pink and red, like bring more color into it, but not like, hey, we're, hiding in the black and a bunch of dark stuff going on. And again, I don't have any judgments about it. I just see it as like if people want to, what I mean by that is, well, I do have assessments about it. I think if people want to explore that, they should totally go explore it. I do think that there's something, negative going on there too. And I've seen a lot of recently as I've become more aware of some of the coaches out there around masculine and feminine polarity, a lot of them I can tell have a very distorted, almost something going on, and I can tell they have a strong base in the BDSM community in a way that's not healthy. And I'm not saying BDSM is not healthy. Get on with your bad self. You can totally play and have fun anyway.
How applicable do you think masculine and feminine polarities are? Like, obviously, it's a classic way to think, and our brains go there really easily. But then a lot of people would say it doesn't really account for the kind of multi-directional diversity that human sexuality consists of. What's your take on that?
I think what we're seeing right now is a backlash. So I agree with you in general. And for me, it's contextual. But also, what I'm seeing is a massive backlash from everything that's wrong in the world is masculine, which we've been hearing for 30 years. Like, the reason we have war is because there's no woman in the White House, or the reason that, like, the list goes on and on and on. Or the commercials where it's like the smart girl with the dopey guy, like whether it's Good RX, which has a new one out, which is like, she's the smart one making savings. And he's like, huh? I didn't know about Good RX. And we see that in our culture all over the place. So there is a, like, what happened to the men who will, kiss me deeply, grab me by the back of the hair, and fuck me till my eyes cross. And part of it is because the guys have been feminized by our culture for so long. And the sensitive ones are like, maybe everything that is wrong with, like, these, like, I apologize for being a man thing. I'm like, I haven't done anything. I haven't crossed any boundaries. So I'm not going to apologize for men. It's like the masculine version of white guilt. It's like, I didn't own any fucking slaves. I'm sorry that I'm not going to feel guilty for being white or male. Or do I think there's advantages to it? Hell yeah. But I'm not going to, feel guilty as a result of it. Like, just because I was born with this genitalia and in this body, like, am I supposed to feel inherent guilt? And so I think there's a lot of things wrong there. I think masculine and feminine polarity, women are craving it. Women are craving men in the right context that will, grab them. I went to a birthday party a few years ago, and there was, and I knew virtually nobody there. There's probably 100 people there. I think I knew 5, but every sexy woman I saw, I very reverently asked, and this is, the next step on I was halfway through my bullet points on Evolutionary Gentleman. One of it is this reverent appreciation for the feminine. And, I'm good friends with Nicole Dayton. I never liked One Taste, the community, and I never got deeply involved, but Nicole Dayton and I talk about once a week still. And I've known her for 16 years. And she said, you get away with that stuff because of your deep appreciation for the feminine. And what I got away with is I spanked 25 women, I think, at that party, because I was just like, I'm a connoisseur. I'm an ass. And you have an excellent one. May I spank it playfully? And they'd be like, oh, yes. And so I got in, she said, but it came up innocently when I asked her, because I did a video about how it's so silly you can't ask a woman's age. And I'm actually hoping that they're over 40. Like, I don't like to date women in their 20s, or I don't get guys that want that. And, it's so silly, this whole, like, you can't ask a woman her age. I'm like, I have a higher opinion of women. Plus, I'm looking to see how confident they are with themselves. It's actually what I'm looking for. And she said, well, Jason, your deep appreciation for women comes across, but other guys are sometimes just dicks. They're asking it to, oh, I didn't know you were, like, they're asking it to give some sort of negative thing. So, I think if you have a deep appreciation for somebody, so I do think polarity is a real thing. I think it's important. It shouldn't play out in the boardroom or in business, or, like, for me, like, whoever should take a more masculine role is whoever's more competent in that thing, right? Like
This issue of appreciation and reverence for women, do you think that's just part of your particular temperament, or do you think it's a quality that can be practiced and developed in anybody?
I think almost anything can be practiced. I mean,
so what would men do to become more reverentially appreciative of women?
Yeah. Just walking down the street, like, breathe in their femininity. Like, if you see a woman with, she's got like a summer, like a spring dress on, what are they like, spaghetti straps, and I think it's called a summer dress. And and just breathe that in. Don't try to get anywhere with her. Just deeply appreciate, like, in your own body, what happened when she walked by. You know, how much it inspires you. And for me, you know, I don't believe in an anthropomorphic view of God. So what I have is the feminine. Hips and thighs and boobies and all the things. Like, just the, you know.
Oh, what does more sensitive masculinity look like when it doesn't take the form of something that sabotages masculinity?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's really good. So I think at the core of it is men need to be right with themselves, that they're doing the right thing, that there's nothing wrong, like that being masculine is great, that women want it. And if you know you haven't done anything wrong and she's upset, like I know a lot of guys who, like, just because the woman's upset, they think they fucked up. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Are you right with your own choices? Are you in integrity with your own choices? So you can be sensitive to her needs. And like, I consider myself devotional to the, like, but when I'm in love with a woman, I'm absolutely devotional to her. But I'm not going to lose my masculine core because she's unhappy, you know? And so you have to have some awareness to her, some sensitivity to what's going on for her. But it can show up like this. Like, I had a woman, you know, come visit me, and she had driven, you know, 3.5 hours. And she got here and she was kind of cranky. I was like, you seem a little cranky. Like, would you like some food? Like, do you need some, you know, what can I get you to, you know? And so there's nothing, you know, inherently feminizing about that for me to be sensitive to her needs. But I also did it smilingly. I was like, I didn't get into an argument about it. I was just like, hey, you seem a little cranky. Would you like a shower? The towels are warm already, you know, like that. And so I don't think being attuned to a woman is, you know, inherently compromising your masculinity. Where I do think some men go wrong is they buy into this idea that you're supposed to surrender to a woman to be an evolved man. And I see a lot of women abuse this dynamic with men. And basically they're, you know, and there's lots of reasons for it. I posted a thing about it a while back around how they're just looking for a horse to bridle. And then they dress it up as spirituality. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a very high level way of dominating a man. And if that's your thing, great, but let's not dress it up as somehow more spiritual or more evolved. And I think a lot of men fall into that trap because they think it's how they're supposed to act these days. And it's really not. One of the reasons there's such a huge backlash is because women actually want the return to the masculine. They want that experience, but they know they don't need a man. It's the women who, you know, are using that to manipulate men for financial support or for logistical. I've seen it a lot more for logistical support, like, you know, do this thing, like handle all the logistics so I can get up on a stage and do a thing. And, you know, maybe she's the most creative one, but also I think men surrender to that in a way that has them lose their self-respect. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. You mentioned the disappointing lack of orgasms in the fetish community and maybe analogous communities. I wonder what your take was on communities of spiritual sexuality where orgasms are de-emphasized, where they either think of orgasm as something that they should make a more diffuse abstract phenomenon or something that they should radically minimize.
You know, I have friends. There's 2 different communities that have been started, and I've been friends with them for a while. And there's a reframe on orgasm. What, you know, orgasm is for women. It's like she's like, there's certain things. So distinguishing climax from orgasm, I think, is useful. I'm not sure how true it is. And then there's this other term called tumest, which is basically like, you know, an engorgement of the genitals, just more blood flow. Basically, it's like turn on. Or I've never known how much of it is a great reframe, because some people don't know how. Like, one of the things about an evolutionary gentleman is he's got mastery over the female anatomy. I mean, and that includes subtlety of touch, as well as just knowledge of how her body works, but also being attuned to feedback from her, because all pussies are basically designed the same, but none of them are the same. So, everyone has their preferences about pressure and about, erogenous zones and all those things. But I don't have any evidence to support this, but my intuitive sense is often that the whole, like, well, climax is because the pressure creates more tension in her body, which makes climax less likely. But also there's, I think, 25% of the female population still hasn't had a climax by the age of 25. I think it was there's some statistic that's just alarming. And so taking a lot of that pressure off, I think, is useful. I also think climaxes are really, really useful. We've all made the joke about the person who's upset because they haven't had sex, in however many days, or, right? Oh, they need to get laid, right? Because it's true. So, I think having, I don't know. I do think having it as a goal creates problems in the bedroom. Like, if you make it about that was successful because there was a climax, or that was unsuccessful because there wasn't a climax, that's a problem. And it creates interpersonal dynamic problems. And it just makes everybody more tense.
There are these.
When I have intercourse, I climax about 50% of the time. Probably because I don't care that much about it. It's not because, whatever. Also, if she's come a couple times, I'm like, all right, let's just have some food now.
That's enough already. There'll be a next time.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that's actually part of it too. Like, I think a lot of guys judge themselves, like, as good or bad if she climaxes or not. The woman's all stressed out because of that, which makes it less likely that she'll actually climax. But also there's a scarcity mindset around it. And I actually think a lot of men, this is my hunch, a lot of men have premature ejaculation because they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm fucking.
Whereas if they were just tiny window.
Right. And because the whole, like, and so, I think, I don't want to say desensitizing, but actually, like, just accepting, like, there's plenty of women out there. There's plenty of sex out there. I mean, and I actually have sex way less than most people probably think. Unless I'm in a relationship, and then it's like, I'm insatiable for her because I'm in love with her. But I just went through 11 months with no sex, like, just because I couldn't find an appropriate fit. So it's not like I'm out there, you don't think
burn
through all that in my mid-20s
is primarily related to the frequency of the actual events? You think it's more in the attitude?
I think it's both. I think if they knew there was going to be next time, or if they, but also just accepting that there's plenty of women out there. There's plenty of sex out there. There's plenty of opportunities. But also, I think sometimes men, and I've heard women do this also from women. I've heard they do this also, but men make bad choices to have sex. I'm like, don't do that. Like, but also there's this hunger that they have that they need to sort of burn through. I actually tasked a client of mine 2 years ago with, because every woman he meets, he's like, I think she's the one. He met her that night at a happy hour. I was like, okay, man. And he was in Dallas, and I was like, all right, dude, how much sex have you actually had? And he told me. I was like, all right, here's what you need to do. Because he kept, like, occasionally a woman would come home with him, and he'd be like, oh my God, that was a nightmare. Because he's like, maybe she's the one. I was like, you need to burn through a bunch of pussy. You need to, like, and so I assigned him 52 and 52. Like, have sex with 52 women in 52 weeks. he only made it like 3 or 4 weeks before, and I knew this would happen before he was like, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" I'm like, exactly. So stop it. Like, she's probably not the one. And I'll never have sex before a third date because that's the minimum amount of time it takes to weed out fit or not fit.
Do you think the practices of attuning more deeply to the feminine help men to feel connected so that they're not worried so much about the scarcity? Like, they're not worried they're going to get cut off from that because they've been feeling into it more intentionally and more frequently?
Yes. I also think they would probably actually have more sex because, let's be clear, women actually want to have sex way more often than men do, really. But men don't realize it. Or men are sabotaging it by, doing weird things because they're not in tune with them. And so, like, a great thing for a guy to do is to just like watch the tops of her shoulders and breathe with her. And this is it's a tantric sex technique, but you could do it anywhere. Like, you could do it, you meet them at a happy hour. Well, we're in a pandemic, but like you meet them out somewhere, or they come over to your house for dinner or whatever people are doing these days. And the easiest place to watch their breath is tops of their shoulders. And you can just match that and sort of feel into their nervous system. And I also think that subtlety of touch. So like, you never want to grab her, but if you just like light fingers on the back of her arm, and you'll see how she'll either lean into you involuntarily. It'll be an involuntary thing. Or she'll contract. That tells you a lot. And it's just a few fingertips on the back of her arm. You don't need to get to the knee of the thigh because that's but also like if they're flushing or they're flipping their hair, biting the lips, the obvious one, and these are all involuntary signs of attraction, of turn on. But for the most part, I think guys they get too wrapped up in a lot of things, and if they just slowed down and matched her pace, then they wouldn't have to have all these awkward conversations, and they often both leave unfulfilled, confused, like that.
You were mentioning statistics, the sort of horrifying statistics about what percentage of women, at least on this continent, say they've never had an orgasm. And I'm assuming that some of that comes from the fact that masturbation was discouraged in their youth and they didn't get to practice teaching their body how to do it. So that brings up the whole topic of child sex education. What's not enough and what's too much and when should they be exposed to what and all these sorts of things. What's your general sense on educating kids about sex in a healthy way?
It's that last clause, that last prepositional phrase, in a healthy way. I don't know, man. I don't have kids. What I do know is, and thanks for the softball lead in. What I do know is, when I was 8, my father sat me down and explained to me, he had a couple of books. One was Everything You Always Want to Know About Sex, But We're Afraid to Ask, which is it's a tome, it's like 600 pages or something. He explained to me, how to find the clitoris, how to, pull the hood back. He taught me how to find the G spot. And this is 1978. So at the time, I actually remember seeing an article saying, is the Grafenberg spot even real? Grafenberg, Dr. Grafenberg's who the G spot's named after. And if you guys don't know, you gently reach in just inside, sort of behind it, and feel for the ridges. That's your G spot, just in case. I was actually on a sexuality training with a client of mine, and when he was explaining to people how to find the G spot, I was like, "Don't guys know that?" And he's like, "No, man. Like guys in their 40s don't know." It's really it's on the backside of the pubic bone, kind of. Anyway, it's way shallower than you think. It's typically only, a couple of inches inside, but it's right behind the clitoris. Just feel gently for the ridges. Gently for the ridges. I think it was the only third grader who knew the word perineum. And so that knowledge, while I was a virgin, until I was 17, that knowledge, just that awareness. And he gave me a couple of other tips around, just have your attention on her. Her body's a feedback driven system. So if she's getting, goosebumps, or if she's breathing more deeply, or like he gave me some basic nonverbal signs. What I do notice is a lot of the sex education around for kids in school is around, not getting pregnant or not getting diseases, but it's not around, here's your body. I mean, this last year, I had a woman who had never looked at her own pussy, and she was 40. So I was like, oh, okay. And so after she took a shower, I brought in a mirror. I was like, time for you to see your own body, and so, if you need to squat over a mirror, but the idea that she had never seen her own pussy really blew my mind. So I don't, I just think exploring your own body, taking a bubble bath, well, maybe not bubbles, depends on the soap, but like just exploring your own body, just and get a mirror and see what your own anatomy is like. So I think that's part of it. I don't know at what age. I've met women from New York who very congruently claim they had consensual sex at the age of 12. They're like, no, it was still definitely consensual, and that's what everybody was doing at my age. And I was like, damn. I was until I was 17, 12. That's amazing. Like, maybe that's just New York and Miami. I don't know. But eight's too young. I don't know. 14's probably too old, but like
knowledge of anatomy and the mechanics of pleasure and things like that you received from your father at an early age, you feel like that was generally benign, generally positive and useful information for you to have even very early on. Yeah,
well, there was no sexual misconduct. So, I mean, there was no, there was nothing that was inappropriate. It was a conversation.
Right. Nobody was.
He gave me
anyone's integrity.
Yeah, and like nobody was touched. Nobody, like, it was a conversation. We watched the sun come up. Like there were books, and I've never, most women I tell that story to, with very few exceptions. Most women are like, "That's amazing," but they're like, if they have kids, they're like, 8 might be too young. We're like, yeah, I mean, it might be. I don't know, but it's better. Like, I've met men who are 30 who didn't even know what the clitoris was. That's that's a tragedy. But women not knowing their own, but like at first, just find out what you like with your own body. And this is super basic stuff, but really, I think it's important. I mean, to have a woman this last year not have ever seen, again, I think she was 38. I mean, it's extraordinary to me. Like,
a lot of
also with my father. Yeah, well, the best benefit was I grew up in a shame-free sexual environment. And he even told me then, like, whatever people's orientations are, that's fine. Whatever they do in the bedroom, that's their business. So, gay, straight, bisexual, pansexual. I mean, it's a very advanced 70s conversation. He was in monster in most other areas, but he got a couple things right, and sex was one of them. He also taught me about consent at the age of 8. It was a very crude consent conversation, but he basically said, if a woman doesn't want to do a thing, don't do the thing, because you could end up in jail, and there will be another woman who will want to do the thing desperately. I was like, all right, so everybody has their own preferences.
Shame is universally negative, or in like a developmental sense, is it appropriate to some strata of culture?
I think it's great for controlling people.
Okay. So there might be times, like I can imagine historical circumstances where the preservation of a culture might depend upon exerting a lot of control over the people, more than might otherwise be exerted at the expense of their authenticity and autonomy. But we don't seem to be in that kind of situation at the moment.
Not for a few hundred years, but I think that I also think a lot of people collapse guilt and shame. I think guilt is useful.
What's the
a lot of people, yeah. So first of all, there's a sensational difference, but there's also a definition difference. So guilt is feeling as if you had violated your own nervous system, or no, sorry, not your own nervous system, your own value system, and you need to therefore fix it. So it's like you want to go into action to repair the error. Like, oh, you know, I that violates my own value system. I should go fix that. And it almost feels like an adrenaline rush and like a zing down your spinal cord. You want to go into action. Shame actually slows down the process of repairing it, because you go, and I am therefore a horrible person. I'm unlovable. I'm unworthy. And a lot of people just go into this like shame cloud, and it just slows down them acknowledging where they fucked up, acknowledging that they, maybe violated trust or violated a container or whatever it is. And shame's this like heavy, oppressive, cloudy, I call it an atmosphere. And you have to get through that. It's also a thought error. It doesn't, like, you violating something doesn't mean that you're unlovable, unworthy, and a bad person. It means you did a bad thing. And so there's both a physical sensation difference, but a lot of people just have them collapse because of the way, I don't want to use stereotypes, but it's mostly religion, or the Jewish mom.
The idea of guilt as sort of an invitation to development and higher integrity.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether people, is there a cultural phenomenon that you see that makes it difficult for people to understand when they feel guilt, when they feel like their own values have been violated? Because I get the sense sometimes that people are being told that they can't be in violation of themselves and that anything they do is wonderful.
Yeah. Well, that's just nihilistic self-indulgence. The other problem, though, that confuses it is that we're shamed so much in this culture. Like, sure, religion may not be the thing, but we definitely have fundamentalists, political fundamentalists, or not so much religious fundamentalism in this country, at least not what I'm exposed to, but in the major metropolitan areas, I've seen people be shamed for simply saying hello, and so there's this whole like, well, you shouldn't be behaved like you're blah 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 blah, like looking at a woman as somehow toxic masculinity, and so there's a lot of really heavy shame that goes on that actually, I think, not only is it's still a control mechanism, right? Doesn't matter if it's religion or if it's political or if it's, but also it slows down people having their own evolutionary awakening around what fits, what doesn't fit, what's attuned and what isn't attuned. And we're seeing a lot of people who have been abused simply becoming the abusers. But it's happening emotionally, not physically. I was in the.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, just switching topics a little bit. Do you think subtle energy is a real component of sexuality, or is it just a useful metaphor?
I don't know, man. I haven't had anybody talk about subtle energy who hadn't done at least one mushroom trip. So I think there are subtleties that people don't notice. I think there's some evidence to support, like there's a feel. I mean, even if it's just our heat signature, it goes beyond our body. And I think there's a lot of subtle awareness that people don't have. So, when I talk about just subtle fingertip touch, I don't know that subtle energies are useful unless you're, it's a murky area. It's sort of like, it's one level below spirit guides for me. And I've certainly been on the side of the side and seen waves coming off a thing or sound waves on a ceiling I'm sure that's real. There's a certain kind of synesthesia that goes on there. But I don't know how useful that conversation is, and I'm not an expert in it. But I have noticed a pattern. I don't know anybody who's never done drugs who talks about subtle energies. Sorry, man.
What that pattern is.
Okay.
Yeah. This business about watching someone's shoulders when they breathe and matching their breathing, sort of, on the one hand, like you were saying, it's a classic piece of Tantra, but it's also a piece of contemporary rapport building.
Yes,
A lot of people kind of weaponize NLP and hypnosis in a
they do.
predatory manner.
They do. That's actually why I'm somebody who wanted to. So I'm about to do an NLP training, and my last one I've led. This will be the fourth one I've led. It's a 7-month training, and I had a student who wanted to promote it. He's like, "Well, give me your affiliate link." I'm like, He's like, "What?" I'm like, "I have 2 conversations with somebody before they're allowed to register because I want to make sure they're going to use it ethically. Nobody can just sign up for an NLP training with me. Like, I don't allow it." So anyway, please continue.
No, I just was curious about your take on the cultural tendency of men to use those skills in a disengaged predatory manner versus how
Yeah.
do you skew those skills in a healthy, positive direction?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm in favor of people taking the training, not with me or like anybody, especially hypnotic language training. So if you watch a television commercial, you know if you're being manipulated by it or not. And right now there's a couple of really good ones. They do it really, like Lexus has this commercial about inspiration, and they use a lot of NLP, and I'm like, wow, that's a really, really good one. And they rev the engine when you're about to, when like it's like the teenage first touch of the hand, on the couch, and like somebody diving off a cliff, and a painter like doing a red stripe across the canvas when she's just like, and they rev the engine every time, and then at the end they rev the engine and you see the car, right? And so that's a brilliant use of NLP, but you can know, like, why am I feeling chills when that happens? Well, it's because they're collapsing anchors. It's like, here's this thing every human's experience. And the commercial, there's like a minute version of it. It covers pretty much all the things that somebody's, like a nature photographer seeing a lion, like a little girl seeing a lion in a zoo. And she's like, and the lion growls and she gets all excited. And so, you can see if you're being manipulated or not. I'm very judgmental about men using it to manipulate women, because you don't need, first of all, there's two domains where you really want to, or you want to remember why people made the choice. One is if she wakes up next to you. The other is if they gave you a lot of money. You don't want buyer's remorse around either one of those things. So I'm against using NLP in sales. I'm against using NLP in the sexual context. Now, one could say it's impossible, but I mean, like, because, an orgasm while they're looking at you is going to be an anchor, right? So in a way, there's no way to avoid your neurology being tied there, but to use it in a way that manipulates them to get to that point. And really, guys there's only 3 things you actually need to be successful with them. And I've seen plenty of guys who I'm like, how is he with her? He has his attention on her. He's curious about her. In the room, she's the only person that exists, and he's up to something bigger than himself. It could be, rescuing puppies, or, like it could be volunteering in an animal shelter, or it could be trying to transform the planet. But those are the only things and just, be kind, be respectful, but have all of your attention on her, be curious about her, and be living some purpose. And so all these tricks and shit, come on, man. Like, it's a low quality game.
Do you think that most of the insights and teachings that you make available are equally applicable to homosexuals, or is it mostly in the male-female context?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I really do think it transcends gender and preference. In fact, there's a project I'm not doing anymore called The Romantic and the Cynic, but in the FAQ, we addressed, like, look, it doesn't matter if it's polyamorous or monogamy or gay or straight or, pansexual. There are certain dynamics at play, but also even in a gay relationship, like I had a gay client, and he was talking about problems in his marriage to a man. And I said, well, which one of you has more structure and which one of you is more, go with the flow? Which one of you is more like penetrative and aggressive is the wrong word, but like assertive? And which one of you is more receptive? because and he told me, he was like, oh yeah, like, so, his husband, like, and by the way, his husband like had the deeper voice, said that, but he was the more feminine one. Like he was the one that was like, go with the flow, didn't like scheduling things, but he occurred as more masculine, like in his way of, but he wasn't.
So it's
He
not
was
quite just
energetically
having more testosterone in your body.
no. So yeah, it applies to, and I, for years, I've been in this business 16 years, and I've always tried to write distinctions that transcended form, meaning monogamy, polyamory, or sexual preference or gender, because I think these are human problems. And I mean, polarity, there's always going to be, it's like who's leading when you dance. And whoever's leading, that's masculine. Whoever's following, that's feminine. And I remember I actually think anybody who wants to, like certainly any guy who wants to learn about polarity, or a woman who wants to learn about how to surrender, there's not a lot of guys that they feel they can surrender to these days. And I know I'm getting back to gender specific, but I took a partner dance class, and they actually told, like, here's how you hold a woman, and here's how you lead her. Like, and there was a certain way to like be in like the hands like way higher than I thought in her, so that she felt secure in where you were taking her next. And like of all the practices I think are really good, man, go. And I know it's probably next to impossible right now in the pandemic, but go take a partner class from somebody who gives you, very specific instruction on how to lead. And that metaphor bears out, because, the feminine wants to be led. They really do, but not controlled, not controlled. That's you can't control it. Trying to think of a good physiological metaphor. I mean, control is top down. It usually comes from fear. It usually comes from insecurity. Like recently, a woman asked me, she's like, what do you think about a guy? And her and I were talking about dating. We ended up not dating, but she said, what do you think about a guy who, because I was like, I don't really like to go out a lot. She's like, well, do you mind if I do? I was like, yeah, why would I? Like, go for it. Have a blast. Come back and tell me all the great things you enjoyed, And I've even had, in the past, we've even had women with other lovers. They come home from a date. I'm like, how was it? And they say, oh, it was great. I was like, well, what did you enjoy most about it? What did he do really well? Like, I want to know those things. Partly because she gets to share it, so she feels excited. She feels comfortable that she's not worried about my response, which is where a lot of guys fuck up. And also, if you just, if you're jealous, you're going to lose her anyway. When I was 15, I had a girlfriend, I was 15. So we were together for 2 weeks, as one does when you're 15. And when she broke up with me, she said, although she's the reason I know who Depeche Mode is, but she said, women are like sand. If you hold them too tightly, they run through your fingers. But if you just sort of cup them, then it stays there. And I was like, huh. And I still remember that. Her name was Debbie. That was 35 years ago. But I think the difference between leading and being controlling is you're in, first of all, you're in tune. Like if you think about the dance metaphor, you guys are aligned. You're going in the same direction, doing the same thing together. It's usually something that like guys don't go, hey, would you like to go dancing? Unless they're like women want you to move with them, right? But I think it really is about whether or not you're doing a thing together or separately, and whether or not it's coming from fear or inspiration, or fear and contraction, or desire and expansion.
I noticed when you were giving the anecdote of, having a woman go out and come back, and then you asked her, what did she do well and what did she like? And then both of those questions are requests for evaluated information. When you get some of their value system, they're making a distinction between positive and negative, or better and worse, or things they enjoyed and didn't enjoy. How important do you think it is to, in terms of relating to people or relating to the feminine, to get information that's value polarized rather than just generic information.
Well, I don't actually know that that's accurate. I think, you know, when I ask her what she really enjoyed, it's really so she can just be in her like effervescence and be, you know, effusive and feel good. Like it's not, you know, I'll certainly learn what she liked, and you know,
Do you think you're helping someone feel good by questioning them in a way that orients them toward what they liked? Because a lot of people talk and they don't talk about what they enjoyed in their experience.
Yeah. So in the beginning of a relationship, I have some similar questions where I'm like, you know, what's important in relating? How would you know when you had that? And I ask a lot of questions like that to make sure we're aligned around values. I think it's important to have where a lot of people, I think, fuck up with relationships is they think that they need to be fully aligned. I'm like, actually, you want to look for complementary, I think. Like if you're confident with, as long as there's not a misalignment of values, but you want to look for like complementary stuff. Like, I don't think it's a problem. Although I posted a meme recently that said something like, you know, like find out how long you want to stay at a party, and that's a better indicator. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like 90 minutes, you know, and that's and that, you know, partly because that can cause conflicts. But I like dating. I'm a massive introvert. I like dating extroverts, and not because, you know, I feed off that, because I don't. I like being alone. That's how I recharge. But because they're complementary and they have skills I don't have that I can learn from socially and like that. So I don't know that I'm answering your question. But I think it's important to not get if we're talking about the feminine, you don't want to get her into logic about her night. That's not, if you want to do it to learn more about her, but do it in a like inquiring way of approving. And it's important that she feels approval, so that she'll feel safer and safer to tell you the truth. I mean, the minute you start judging somebody or their friends or anything like that, it starts to whittle away at them being fully self-expressive. And you're just a few more steps away from them just lying to you because they think you can't hear the truth. And then that's where relationships start to die. And turn on dies too. You know, this happens. That's a sign of a pussy drying up.
Excellent. Master of sound effects, Jason McClain. How much of the problem with contemporary masculinity do you think is a problem around the integration of aggression? Seems like there's a lot of people who either fly off the handle all the time or act like they don't have any aggression at all, and it just recedes into the background because they flatter themselves that they're non-aggressive. Both of those are someone who's not really owning their aggression and making it be a useful part of themselves.
Yeah. So I'm going to say that I think the first group, the ones that, you know, fly off the handle, they have some stuff to resolve from their past because it's disproportionate. And the second group, I think, is just full of shit. Sorry, that's all I got on that one.
Do you have any helpful advice for people who are full of shit?
Oh, yeah. Don't be full of shit.
It's like, oh man.
I mean, it's like, hey man, we're all, you know, we all have moments where, I mean, I have murderous thoughts all the time. I'm like, oh yeah, you know, if it were legal or if body disposal were easier. But I don't like, I want to make sure I'm skillful with my communication. So for me, it's largely about results. But also I've done a tremendous amount of healing and clearing. You know, I mean, the NLP people I was trained by were therapists. So I got the here's how to heal with NLP, not here's how to, like, you know, and part of my certification said that I demonstrated respect for the ecology of the being, is what they put on our certificates. So there's a Sith side of the NLP, and there's a Jedi side, and I was fortunate enough to be trained by the Jedi side. But you know, I think that to think that we don't have. Now, I'm rarely angry. It's really rare. But, 20 years ago, I still had some shit to work out. Even my divorce, which was, horrifying. I never got angry. I was, grief stricken. But I never actually got angry, until she called me up a year later and let me know her last name had been changed on her anniversary. And then I was like, I had 24 hours of like, well, I mean, OJ got away with it. No. And then I, moved to compassion. But to deny it is a kind of self-suppression that, and I hate to use words I am not. So I don't like to use words that a psychologist should use. So I don't like using words narcissism or gaslighting, or like there's a bunch of terms I don't like to use. And bypassing is another one. But that sure as fuck occurs to me like bypassing. Unless that guy's like going up and, has a kickboxing session every week where he gets it out. But, I just got my testosterone results back. They're pretty high, but it's channeled appropriately. So I do think anger is a problem that can be resolved using some mental technologies that clear it out from your past, like the reinforcement of it from your past, or, the gestalt is what we would call the sequence of events that gets fired off. And anytime somebody has a disproportionate emotional response. I mean, in relationships, it's like when somebody blows up because the toilet paper's on the wrong way. It wasn't because the toilet paper's on the wrong way. It was the 10 other things that they never resolved over the last couple of months in the relationship that they didn't say anything about. So it's like that, but, over your whole life.
I remember reading a newspaper article when I was a kid about an old lady. She was in her 80s. She'd stabbed her 80-year-old husband to death 200 times. And when the police caught her, she said, well, he put the milk in the fridge wrong. And I'm like, that can't be. That can't be the reason. And she's 88. She must have had to take breaks to do it 200 times. Like, that's a huge commitment. Something else was going on.
I was watching a stand-up comedian, and he said something about how a guy in prison who is really obese, he was like 400 pounds, was stabbed something like 200 times. He's like, you know how many times and it was like over, he's like, you know how many times that is over 5 minutes? I did the math. He's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's like, I'm sure you had to switch arms. Like, like 200 times, man. I just read a sequence of somebody posted something about, and this is, who knows if it's real or not, but somebody was they were a caretaker in an assisted living facility, and these old women would finally trust him enough to talk about people they killed, and so these grandmothers are like, yeah, well, and so like they would just kill abusive husbands in the 50s and 60s and just move to Alaska, or and there's all these stories. I was like, damn, gangster grandmas, but also, they trust him enough to tell him the truth. 200 times, man. Yeah, it wasn't that thing. It wasn't the milk.
Yeah. I was going to ask you a question about triggering, but actually I feel like I want to ask a more general question, like, what else haven't we covered? What's rattling around in the dungeon of your sexual insights that I haven't asked anything about yet?
Well, I do want to get back to this list, and it's relevant because, I think 3 of the things are 3.
Let's finish that list. That'd be great.
Yeah. So he's got, the Evolutionary Gentleman, the rest of it is he's got mastery of the female anatomy, and he's attuned with their body and the subtleties. He has a deep appreciation for women and the feminine. He has high self-esteem. He has attention on his own development, like stages of development. He's living his purpose. He's shame-free sexually. He's comfortable with his own feminine. He's over his sexual hunger. Doesn't mean he's not. I mean, when I'm in love with a woman, I am insatiable for her, but I don't make mistakes. I don't fuck below my pay grade is actually the way I like to say it. But he has his aesthetics figured out. Like, he knows He has to match his belt with his shoes. And then finally, he's got this column of iron and light, which is a phrase I came up with very recently to talk about, not only like having your masculine core, but also contributing to the world in a way that shines, that people feel good about. I think this whole one of the problems we're seeing lately is men teaching polarity or masculine. They're just assholes, and they can't hear feedback, and they're just it's a kind of they're just narcissists marketing their shadow, but they're really good marketers. So, but in terms of sex, I mean, like I said with women, I mean, guys should also explore their own bodies. I mean, one of the reasons I know I like really feminine, mostly submissive women is because I've tried everything else that's possible to try. So I'm like, all right, well, I know what I like, and what I like is this. And other people who are like, and women who you're like, they've like, you've done that. I'm like, yeah, which is why you can trust that I like you, because I've tried other things. You're not going to have to worry about me running off on some secret life or having a second, like I've tried all the things. I know what I like. Here's what I like. And you're that.
How old were you when you thought, I think I know what I like now?
I mean, I wouldn't say I ever thought maybe I like something else, but I was like, well, and I've always had a rule, like, let me try it twice just in case I fucked it up the first time. But, also like my wife and I explored a lot of things all the way out in my mid 30s. And, there's some things worked, some things didn't. But also the older I get, the more, I'll call it like, I just consider myself a gentle, dominant top. Like a loving, dominant top. But I'm like, yeah, I tried those things. I don't want to, but I don't, it is a spectrum. Like there's a, yeah, I don't know. I never was in question about my sexuality. I was just open to trying more things than people were typically. Because I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, let's see. Like if people get out of their heads around like, ugh, that's better. And I always thought guys are homophobic. I mean, the lady doth protest too much, I think is an easy phrase. It's like, you can say, like, I've never been homophobic, but I've certainly, like, I don't walk down the street looking at guys. But if I was in a group sex situation, I wouldn't be like, no, 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 no. But I'm also like, no, I'm not interested. Like, I wouldn't be offended, but I wouldn't be inspired by it. You know what I mean?
Again, there's kind of a question like, is that just your temperament, or do you think that kind of unoffended experimentalist attitude is an essential piece of someone building self-knowledge and wisdom around sexuality?
I don't know about temperament. So I agree with the second part. What I will say about the first part is I cannot overestimate how valuable it is to have had a father who said, who like was shame free in his conversation with me about sex when I was 8, and also explained to me the female anatomy and like all those things like that. I got, and I remember being the first time that my father and I watched the sunrise. Like it's sort of baked into my development from the age of 8. So is it, temperament's tricky. At what point is temperament just genetics, and at what point is temperament you were told from the age of 5 that you're going to be like that, you can do anything, like, I don't know. I definitely agree with the second part. I think that people should have the orientate, like I've met plenty of people who are like, I didn't think I would like that, but I really like it, whatever that thing might be. Like I've had people want to suck my toes and it just makes me giggle when I'm like, okay, like it just tickles, not my thing, but it's their thing, and okay, you can have your thing. But I think people should actually, if they get their heads out of the way, say, well, let me try that thing, so that you can actually know what your preferences are, right, and not just have it be culturally trained. Like it's what you're supposed to like, or what you're supposed to, I mean, I love eating pussy, but that's because not just because of the pleasure it gives a woman, and not just because I'm really good at it, because I love it. Like it. So to me, like I like to say, I eat pussy for my own pleasure. And by the way, they feel that when a guy's just enthused, and in general, I had my most recent love of my life, because apparently I always think they're the love of my life when I'm in love with them, and then and they get better and better. I only upgrade, but she I was never into boobs before. I was like an ass thigh, leg man. My only thing is the women I date are always under 5. I'm 6 foot, but I like 5 or shorter. This is what my body responds to. But she had these incredible boobs, like just, and so but they weren't sensitive. But after us having sex for 2 years and my overwhelming enthusiasm for them, I could just brush my hand against them and she would have a climax, because it was, and part of that's anchoring, like, so, I think that some of this stuff can be rewired, even if it's not a natural erogenous response initially. And just
business card that says Jason McClain boob sensitizer.
Who knows? Maybe I'll never date a woman with boobs like that again. But also, I also think I don't think it could be overestimated how beneficial it is for a woman. Maybe she's judgmental that she's got thighs.
Right.
Like I posted a thing a couple months ago that blew a lot of women away, and it was probably one of my most, like, hundreds of people commenting, and it was a meme that said, this is where the boner happens, and it was where the stocking, like where the thigh squeezes out of the top of the stocking, and women were like, "What? Do you guys like that?" And Triambika, who's a friend of mine, she's like, "I've avoided stockings because of that." I'm like, no. Like I said, in fact, I like to see it from the rear, so it's even more like squishy, more. And so I think just men being more vocal about what they like too. And if you're enthusiastic about a thing that a woman might be judging herself about, she'll start to shine and get more radiant.
That adoration,
more open to you.
Serve a role in healing the anxiety.
It does, yeah. And most of it's not real anyway. It's in her head, or it's, because the fashion industry is run by gay men who like adolescent body type women, adolescent boy looking.
That, men being more vocal about the things they actually like, I think could be a really important piece of all this. I think I told the story on one of the earlier interviews about being in a supermarket years ago with a friend of mine. And he gives me this elbow thing, right? And he wants to point at some woman on a magazine cover like he's proud that he's recognized that she's socially attractive. And I'm supposed to agree with him somehow. And I couldn't stop thinking, it just seems so weird why he wanted my input on that. But then I started thinking, boy, this guy's never gone after women who looked like that ever. If he was really attracted to that, he would seek that out. That's not what he likes. He's recognizing a social signifier, but he's not actually engaging in a discussion about what he personally moves toward, in his attention and his emotion. I think the conversation about what men actually move toward could be useful to everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I find, a 6'5" woman who's got massive curves attractive walking down the street, but I know I don't want to have sex with her. Like, I'll be like, oh yeah, woman. But I know that, my body only responds to women 5 or shorter. Like that's just, I've tried. Lord, have I tried. And I can usually tell in the first kiss, but I do think men being, so like, who cares what society thinks we should find attractive? What do you find attractive? And I mean, a really great thing, like what kind of porn do you watch? What do you masturbate to is a really great, like, I think guys, if they were just honest about that, and then and women too, like, what do you really like? What turns you on? That you don't, I'll never forget one time my girlfriend came in and I was on the phone with a client and I had paused I had porn up on the screen, right? And I'm having this conversation with a client, and she comes in and lays down next to me on the bed, thinking that there was something like notes about my client on the screen, and it was just insane porn scene. She's like, I'm like, oh, do you want to? And I turned the laptop towards her, she joked with me because 2 weeks later she came into the bedroom and I slammed my laptop down. She's like, "What are you watching?" I'm like, "NFL news." She's like, "Why are you more embarrassed about sports news than you are about porn?" I was like, "I don't know. ESPN's more embarrassing to me than, Pornhub." But I think if men were just not only more expressive with women about which little, like, I've told women I like, the curvature. Like I complimented a girl one time on her, like, she was really petite, but she had a nice little tricep curve. Complimented her on that. We ended up dating for 3 years. It's like, just and she's like, "Thanks, I've been working on it." So, but in bed, just being like, "Oh, I love this part," or just be expressive. It will turn them on. And you're right, it will get over a lot of the made up anxiety they have about parts of themselves that are unattractive that you might actually find really attractive.
Porn is interesting. I mean, there's some problematical elements of it, but it seems like it's a low risk way for people to realize some of their own preferences and do some experimenting that they might otherwise not be able to or willing to do in their manifest life, as well as just a place for jerking off,
Well, yeah, I like to distinguish between, people who are watching porn during sex, in my opinion, are not really having sex, you're not present. But I also think there's value in, it's like, look, if I know I need to have a climax so I can actually get rational, 30 seconds with a porn is better than an hour in the shower. It's like, it's just more efficient. But also, I'm of the strong opinion. Here's this other thing. I don't know if you notice this or not, but like, female coaches teach women they should have as many orgasms as possible, have as many lovers as possible. And then men are taught to retain their climax. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't understand the double standard there. Also, I just consider sexual turn on life force. So, the fact that I have to climax as much as I do, it doesn't mean I need to seek somebody out, but like, it's just life force. And so there's this weird clamping down of male pleasure while simultaneously trying to massively ramp up females, empowerment as them enjoying their own sexual pleasure. I don't know what that is, but it seems weird to me. But I also think that porn has probably saved more marriages than it has destroyed. And I can't tell you how many people I've met who were in shame around their sexual desires, and then they find out that there's 20,000 videos available on that one thing. And so they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not the only one." And it helps them move through their shame around it. And it could be as simple as, they like feet, or, they like whatever, or they like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what people feel shame around, but whatever they express that, oh, there's a whole community of people who like that thing. And so they realize they're not alone. I mean, there was I'll never forget one of the reasons I always talk to women about anal sex is this reason. Not only because they can have more powerful full pelvic orgasms, like anal sex in the missionary position with appropriate cleansing and everything beforehand, but and appropriately done. It's one of the most intimate ways you can make love, and I prefer it in the missionary position. But I had this woman I dated 25 or 26 years ago. Her name was Julia, just this Italian bomb goddess, just like, ugh. And had her shit together. She'd been running her parents' restaurant since she was 14. I think she was 19 at the time and I was 23. But our chemistry was always kind of off. But we stopped dating after a month or two. But we were talking on the phone and somehow anal sex came up and she's like, "You like that?" And I said, yeah, I love it. She's like, "I prefer it, but my last boyfriend made me feel dirty because I wanted to do it." Like, her whole thing was anal sex. That's what she wanted. And her last boyfriend was like, "Ugh," like he had all those judgments about it. And so she didn't even bring it up with me. And so as a result, it was probably on her mind the whole time. And so I just always bring it up. But I also recommend guys bring it up, like, don't bring it up in the bedroom. Bring it up, over coffee, or bring it up out where there's no pressure. Like, talk about fetishes that you want to try. outside the bedroom so people don't feel pressure to try it right then, because they will.
The element of dirtiness is interesting because it seems like it can go two ways. One is there's this judgmental rejection of something that's dirty and shameful. On the other hand, there's this tendency of some people to think that the idealized sexuality is ephemeral and ethereal, but doesn't include any dirtiness. Right? That they think that that's somehow just a cultural poisoning rather than an element of the Muladhara or whatever, right? What's your take on that? Because some people are very, they take dirtiness as a poison to reject, but there are other people who just feel like they're superior to the qualities of even positive dirtiness, so to speak. They don't like sex to be associated with anything filthy or lurid or trashy. They feel like that's denigrating its spiritual potential.
Well, I think almost everybody has trashy fantasies if they want to admit it. And I don't really believe that anything's dirty. I mean, there are, like I said, there are cleansing things that, like, I have a whole, I'm definitely into hygienically clean sex. Like, I'm sort of a freak about hygiene when it comes to sex. But in terms of psychologically dirty, I think even calling it that is a step away from shame. And I've even had women who, love to be spanked and like, spank me, I've been a bad girl. And I like to reframe it. I go, no, you get a spanking because you've been a good girl, or because you've been a good slut, or because you. So I like to reframe those things.
Right.
And to me, you should be able to look a woman in the eye, and you should both be seeing God while you're connected and climaxing. And, you've got your, holding her by the back of the neck, and you've got one other hand on, in her lower back or her lumbar, and you can see colors and see God and have it be a fully spiritual experience, fully sober. Or you can spank her and tell her she wants to be a good slut for you, and I think all of it's okay. I think being a full spectrum lover is really important, and that's just about what fits. But I don't think there's anything between two. As long as there's no abuse going on, there's nothing in the realm of it's dirty that I think should be called dirty. It's just different levels, and I think you should be able to have all the levels with your lover. So,
well, I'm out of questions. Is there anything else we should talk about?
Nope.
All right, this was terrific. Thanks, Jason. Good talk.
Thank you, sir. My pleasure. All right. Talk to you soon.